Welcome back to a demonstration of the diagramming method used in the Zondervan exegetical commentary on the New Testament. In the first session, we looked at the basic setup of our tables that will be used in our diagramming, and we inserted our translation of a few verses. Now again, I want to suggest that you use individual tables for each of the units in your commentary. So as we come to our process of diagramming, we want to remember that we have two main kinds of clauses and phrases that we're going to be looking at. We have main clauses. Main clauses are going to be set over to the left-hand margin. In fact, main clauses are going to be the only thing on the left margin, and our main clauses are going to be put in bold type. So we want to read our text and think through what main clauses do we have in this passage. And then subordinate clauses are going to be indented 3 spaces on the element that those subordinate clauses are delimiting. So let's take a look at how this works. Now what you might do to begin with is read through your translation of your text and separate out the different parts of a given sentence. So here we have, I thank my God. If I wanted to go ahead and sort this out, I could say, every time I remember you, always, in every prayer I pray for you all. I pray with joy because of your participation in the gospel. And I might take that phrase and separate it out from the first day until now. I am sure of this very thing, that the one who began a good work in you will perfect it until the day of Christ Jesus. Now, I have complete freedom, obviously, to move these things around once I get going. But let's take a look at the text here. Now, this passage is very interesting. There are a lot of interpretive issues here about which elements go with which clauses. But I'm not so interested in making a point about the interpretive issues as I am just illustrating the diagramming itself. So let's start with I thank my God. This is our main clause in this passage, so I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to make it bold. And if we look at the epi passe te mnea humon, then that little phrase there is going to be subordinate. It is adverbial, so we're going to indent it 3 spaces on the verb thank. Now, in doing your indentations, what I want to suggest is that you set tabs for your indentations. Now, something you can do is go ahead and highlight the whole rest of the passage, and you can set a tab. Notice that I have the tabs set three letter spaces in on the verb thank. Now, as the main verb, it's possible at least that we're going to have other elements that are going to need to line up on that verb. So that's why I go ahead and put a tab for the whole passage in that place. So with every time I remember you, now I'm going to tab over to that place 3 spaces in on the main verb. Now, in a table, you can't simply push the tab button. You need to push Option tab or Control tab in order to get it to indent properly, to actually make a tab over. So every time I remember you. Now there's a question about where the pantete goes. Does it line up? If it lined up under thank as well, then what we would do is we would put it here. But there is a question about where that word goes. If we look on down in the passage just a bit, we have this I pray with joy. That's the way I translated poiumenos in the passage. And so I think that that participle is going to be lined up on the verb, and I'm actually going to suggest that these next two phrases here are going to line up on that participle. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to set another tab space, and again I'm going to highlight the rest of my passage because it may be that other things need to be lined up on this participle as well. But I'm going to put a tab here, and I'm going to make sure that that tab is about 3 spaces in on the verb pray, or the participle really. So now when I come back up here to always and I tab over, actually I'm a little bit out of line there. I must have hit the tab incorrectly, so I'm going to go up here and I'm going to move it over just a tad so that the tab lines up on the 4th letter of the word pray. So far we have here, I can kind of move this down just to sort it out, but I thank my God every time I remember you. And for the moment, we're making the interpretive decision to say that always, in every prayer I pray for you all, I pray with joy. Now I could sort out the meta charos there. Let me just make a point. As much as we can, we want to maintain the flow of the Greek text. Now it's not always possible with English translation. And I want you to notice that even though in the English translation it looks like we're starting new sentences at points, the always in every prayer I pray for you all in English is a new sentence, but it's not a new sentence in the Greek. So we want our diagram as closely as possible to depict the dynamics of the Greek text. It's going to be hard to do at certain points, but primarily we want to try to follow the flow of the Greek text. So I pray with joy together. In the Greek text, the with joy actually comes before the poiumenos, the way that I translated the term there. But I decided to keep those together. You can keep as much of the text together as you want. The purpose of the diagramming is to highlight certain dynamics of the text, and you have the decision to highlight things however you would like them to be highlighted. So as I carry on with it here, the because of your participation is also going to be indented on that participle. And so we're going to subordinate it to the participle that I've translated with pray there. And then as we come to in the gospel, I think that actually is delimiting the idea of participation. Now again, we're going to need to do our tab. So I'm going to highlight here, and I'm going to put a tab on the 4th letter of the word participation, so that when we bring it over here, it's going to line up under that 4th letter. Sometimes it's a little hard to get your tabs to line up just right. Don't worry about it if they're just off very, very slightly, but we want them to be consistent in terms of being approximately lined up with that 4th letter of the word that's being delimited. So the participation was in the gospel. It was participation from the first day and until now. Now, pepoithos is another participle, and I'm going to suggest that that also is going to line up on the previous participle. So we're going to make sure that we're aligned here. You'll notice the construction here is you have the tuta that is then followed by hati. And I'm going to interpret this as a substitute for an epexegetical infinitive, where hati is used epexegetically after a demonstrative. So what I'm going to do is this. I am sure of this very thing, translating the tuta there, and I'm actually going to provide a little bit of space following the tuta there. We're going to put elements that are parallel in some way, lined up on the same margin. So since this is epexegetical, we're actually going to line the this and the that up so that they are parallel with one another. I am sure of this very thing, that the one who began a good work in you will perfect it. And then the until the day of Christ Jesus is going to be lined up on the verb here. And so we need to do one more tab space on perfect. And that's going to give us until the day of Christ Jesus, subordinated to the verb perfect. So as we look at the diagram here, it's a bit complex, but we're beginning to sort things out. So the main clause is I thank my God. We have, in this interpretation, a main subordinate clause that's built around that participle, I pray with joy. And it's interesting, if this is the right interpretation, that joy is right at the center of Paul's prayer in this case. You have kind of a balanced comment about that prayer of joy. It's always in every prayer that he prays for all of the Philippians. He gives the explanation of because of your participation and describes that participation. And then he speaks about his confidence that really flows from that prayer of joy, or he's able to pray confidently. So you begin to see the structure of the passage, and that can be sorted out in the commentary.